Okay. It's very hot in here, correct? Okay. I keep thinking it's just me. I saw that a lot of women just filtered into the roles for this panel on Femtech, but I'm hoping more men come through so we can share this discussion. My name is Sangeeta Singh-Kurtz. I'm a writer at New York Magazine in New York, so you'll have to bear with me because it's my 4 in the morning right now. I'm a little bit out of it. So happy to be here at TechBBQ and in Copenhagen. It's my first time. So after this panel, run up to me, tell me about your favorite restaurants, your favorite things to do, because I have no idea where to start. Today's panel, yes, is on Femtech, this $60 billion niche industry. Sorry, it's growing to be $60 million by 2027, but it's still considered a niche industry. We're going to be talking about what has changed, what's changing, and what the future opportunities are. I have some great panelists here with me today. It's my pleasure to introduce Pauliina Martikainen. She is the investment director at Maki.vc, a Helsinki-based VC firm that focuses on deep tech and brand-driven companies. We're also joined by Dr. Thomas Crouzier. He is the CSO and co-founder of Cirqle Biomedical. And Cirqle's startup, We, is currently testing a non-hormonal contraceptive in animals. And if that didn't pique your interest, I don't know what will. So today, I'll just start broadly with a question that either of you can answer, but what are we talking about when we talk about Femtech? Pauliina, do you want to start?
Sure. By Femtech, I mean solutions catered towards women's health. And I think that's how the term originally was coined by Clue's co-founder, Ida Tin, in 2016. And I think we've luckily come far from those days, but nevertheless, the term has stuck around. So, women's health.
Pretty much got it?
Got it, right?
Couldn't you give some example of the technologies involved in Femtech and what kind of needs they're addressing?
Well, go ahead.
I think it started out with being mostly tech, meaning apps, and to be able to either track one's health, maybe going to better awareness of where one's health. And some aspects of diagnostics as well. And it is evolving into more of medical devices as well around modernity and women-specific kind of diseases as well that affect women at higher rates.
Okay.
And if I can complement, I think in terms of needs being addressed, I think there's a vast array of opportunities. For instance, just looking at the kind of average perfectly healthy Western woman, so starting from when one gets her period to kind of exploring one's sexuality to maybe getting pregnant, giving birth, recovering from the pregnancies, doing mammograms, managing one's menopause. So definitely a wide array of opportunities, even for the kind of healthy woman.
Yeah.
And another question that I want to direct to both of you is why, when half of the world's population is female and has been for some time now, why has it taken so long for Femtech to develop as a market, as a viable market? What are some of the reasons?
Maybe you can. I can. We're developing a contraceptive, so maybe I could say something about actually more in particular about contraception, and the fact that there basically hasn't been that much emphasis innovation actually in contraception for a very long time. Mm-hmm. The last true innovation has been the pill, hormonal contraceptive, and that was in the 1960s. Right? And since then, there's been some work, but it has been incremental innovation. And mostly, there's multiple reasons for that. I think there's definitely the pharma industry that launched this and that is commercializing hormonal contraceptive kind of felt that this was a done deal because we've have a great solution. It works great if you use it correctly. And it sells great as well. If you look at Bayer or hormonal contraceptive is one of their highest selling products, highest sources of revenue as well. So there's no really any questions, for why would we? What is the incentives to actually invest more in this? And I think things are changing. Definitely, there's a few things that are coming up. There's definitely societal changes as well, especially like the view of hormonal contraceptive is changing. There's a trend towards healthier, greener living as well. That seems a little incompatible with the idea of stuffing your body with hormones. So there's much more kind of a clear kind of need, a call from women to say we don't want to use hormones in our contraceptive anymore, and that's linked with maybe as well kind of more recent technological push that can enable some of these new technologies. I think make it possible to start innovating and start seeing a brighter future, I guess.
Thank you. Pauliina, would you like to add to that? I know it's something we discussed.
I think that was already super comprehensive. So really just echoing Thomas here that like women's health has always been underfunded, under-researched, underserved, and there's a massive opportunity, and really the time is ripe to kind of start bridging the gap and building products that will actually work for women.
You'd mentioned to me the other day that health and fertility, reproductive sort of areas of this market are one of the greater opportunities that you've seen. Can you touch on why that is, as well as mention some of the other places that you're seeing opportunities within Femtech?
I think, so reproductive health and fertility, at least in Europe, has definitely, or is kind of one of the most mature areas within Femtech. According to our data, like 230 million euros have been invested into the space. What's interesting, though, is that funding has actually decreased year on year since 2017, and we haven't seen really kind of too many big exits yet. But definitely an interesting space still. I think some of the things driving that space is definitely that women overall, or kind of the median age when you get or give birth, has been increasing all the time. Women are maybe more in control or want to be more in control of their own fertility, and are demanding solutions that are safer and kind of more personalized. So that's definitely driving the space. And then on the other hand, more and more people, both women and men, are struggling with conceiving. So that's on the other hand then kind of driving the need then for fertility solutions. So I think we're still in early days even within that space.
Absolutely. What would you say, and Thomas, I'd love for you to weigh in here too. You might have mentioned some of these, but what are some of the areas of Femtech that are in the greatest need of innovation, that they've just been stuck at the same thing for many years? I know contraception is one of them, but these markets are untapped.
Absolutely, and I think it links back to just the investment in research and just innovation in the past, many decades. So I think there are numbers kind of floating around, that says that if something like 4% of global R&D goes towards women's reproductive health, and then if you look at things like pancreatic cancer itself, that just concentrates 2% by itself. So there's definitely been less research and investments in kind of women-specific medical conditions. So we don't know enough actually to do anything about it. And I'm hopeful, optimistic that things are changing. I'm seeing, I'm a researcher myself, and I'm looking at academic groups as well. And some are taking a stance and saying, yes, this needs to change. There's a great group at MIT led by Linda Griffith, looking at endometriosis. And what she's done already more than 10 years ago now is say, we master these tools of tissue engineering, organ on a chip, that can be used to develop, new organs and, ways to screen for drugs. That's great. But what would happen if we applied it to a disease, right, or to medical conditions that are completely left ignored? And they've made great progress in understanding actually the biological processes and then opening up for opportunities to treat it by doing this.
So female health conditions are not even...
To do what? Sorry?
Female health conditions are things that they don't even have enough research in them to innovate yet.
Yeah.
And I know you mentioned hormones is one of the things that we don't really know much about.
Yeah, for sure. So that's definitely one thing that I think we lack research on. I think there's some progress, but I'm at least definitely eager to also see products, more research, and then products that actually take into account your hormonal health, maybe from a more holistic point of view. As said, again, like reproductive health and fertility has been kind of at the center stage, but I feel like there's tons of things still that we don't understand about women's everyday life that is very much kind of controlled is maybe the wrong choice of word, but your hormonal health definitely has an effect, and your cycle has an effect in your everyday life and your productivity, etc. So definitely looking for solutions that, for instance, would sync your training with your cycle, sync your nutrition with your cycle, etc. And so that we would just increase the body literacy of women in the coming years.
Yeah, and I'm with you on that. You, Thomas, are the co-founder of a very young startup in this industry, and I would love for you to briefly describe to the audience what We is and why it could be a revolutionary product, but how difficult the path to market has been and why.
Yeah, of course. So we're developing a non-hormonal, on-demand contraceptive for women. We call it We. And it is very different because it works in a very different way from any other contraceptive. It works by leveraging a barrier inside the woman's reproductive tract that already exists, just make it stronger. And that barrier is it's actually the mucus gel that sits in the cervical canal between the vagina and the uterus. So we deliver these polymers that make that mucus stronger, and we just revert that gel into, it's just a very good barrier that stops sperm from entering the uterus. So that is the vision. And really this came from a realization, by actually talking to users, talking to women, that about half of women just do not want hormones in their contraceptives anymore for many reasons, but it is a lot about the sensation, the side effects, the mental side effects as well, and the fear of what could happen when using hormones. But if you're a woman wanting to move away from hormones, you're basically left with alternatives that are not really true alternatives. You're asked to either compromise for efficacy, so just decrease in efficacy, or for some other side effects. Like even copper IUDs lead to heavy bleeding and pain in a lot of women. So there's a huge, obvious unmet need there. And so our approach was always to look at this need, this unmet need, talk to users, understand what would the ideal contraceptive look like, and then make science work towards that, right? And not just push a neat scientific idea into a product. And so we're at the late preclinical stage where we're actually demonstrated that this new mechanism of action can work in an animal model and can work really well. So we're really hopeful to get to that space, right? High efficacy, as good as efficacy as the pill, but without the side effects.
And it's difficult to get to, even though I'm ready to use this like tomorrow, it's difficult to get to market, right? For what reason?
Like any deep tech, product, and life science products, right? We have, of course, multiple challenges. There's the contraception is just hard. That's also one of the reasons why there hasn't been that much innovation. It's because it's not obvious, right? And there's not enough fundamental knowledge, and also just technically, it's very challenging. Yeah, it's one of the few treatments where you actually treat healthy people, right? So there's very high bar in terms of safety. You can't afford to have almost any side effects, and efficacy as well, right? You don't want a contraceptive that gets you pregnant. So the technical bar is really high. And then on the other side, there's also our biggest risk has always been the financial risk. Right? I heard that capital is a commodity, preconceived, maybe to some extent, but I can tell you in femtech, in contraception, it is still a challenge to actually convince investors to invest, especially in early stage.
Of course. And we have an investor right here. So I want to ask you, Pauliina, what do you look for when you are investing in a femtech product? Would you invest in we? You guys can talk about that off stage, but go ahead.
We can discuss after. No, but I actually, when I first heard about we, I definitely thought that there is absolutely something there, and it's definitely very much aligned with my vision in terms of as said, women being more in control and actually understanding maybe their hormonal health a little bit better these days and demanding other solutions. But in terms of what I look for, I definitely look for products that are or solutions that kind of know their target audience really well and cater to their needs very well. Either kind of focused solutions for a specific condition, or then I think it's also interesting kind of to see how all of this plays out in the coming years. I think there will be more femtech aggregators also going forward, so that's also kind of interesting to see what type of a player will win that game eventually. But maybe that's kind of on a broader level what I look for in terms of the most specific solutions for instance around menopause. What I also value definitely if the founders have understanding for the value of data. So for instance, when it comes to menopause, again, lack of research, lack of data there. So if you're able to build solutions and kind of the feedback loop from the symptoms to like how the treatments actually work, I think that like big data play there can be super valuable also for in the eyes of pharma. So that's super interesting in my eyes.
Of course. And that's a good segue because I wanted to talk about trust in these products. I mean, when it comes to putting things in their body, women are obviously wary, especially with the advent of the wellness industry. We don't really know what's in certain things. How do you go about building trust with a femtech product? And I know that's something that you have to do too.
Absolutely, so. Yeah. It's one of the foundation of the company and of the product is that we, and contraception in general is a lot about trust. You have to trust that the product won't harm you and that it would actually protect you from getting pregnant. So we are working in our actual company culture and in the way we build the product to be as transparent as possible. But I think that very clearly one way to gain trust is again with data. So you might have heard medical devices. There are ways to get kind of a fast track approval, especially in the FDA in the US. And in our case, we're a new mechanism of action. We know we're bringing something new to the table. And so it is very important that we conduct these very large clinical trials, many users over many months, to establish very robust data on efficacy and on safety. So that's really the foundation. Without that data, we can't establish trust. And then we've asked women actually, how do you choose your contraceptive? How do you establish that trust? And we've done a lot of surveys and interviews. And we've learned that physicians and gynecologists are still very important today in establish that trust. And so we know that we'll have to take that data and go to physicians and educate and inform about this new product, this new mechanism of action. But at the same time, we also know that other ways women just decide on contraception is by talking to friends, and it is also by just going online and getting information online. So we absolutely also need to be there. We're also wanting to innovate in how we get the products to women through a direct-to-consumer approach, where the user could just take their smartphone and basically order online or talk to a physician online and get it shipped directly to their door. And that allows us to build a community and to enable kind of users to talk to each other and establish that trust. But we know it's something we have to focus on, and it will take some time as well to build up. There's no room for mistakes there.
Absolutely.
I definitely think that the community piece will be super important going forward, and I think that will be kind of one of the enabling factors in terms of just femtech growing as an industry, because more and more of the issues surrounding women's health will be or are being destigmatized, which kind of enables, for instance, the community-led support and kind of building this authentic community and brand. And I think that's definitely, as you said, the very key thing in terms of how to establish trust and grow.
Absolutely. I'm curious, just in general, does Femtech present different challenges when entering like the American versus the European markets? Is it associated with different hurdles? Either of you can answer that.
Again, I could talk about contraception. You'd be we've looked at this obviously, and you'll be surprised at how actually how much common ground there is between Europe, US, but also Asia and even Africa and sub-Saharan Africa. There's especially around this need for non-hormonal alternatives. We see this kind of across the board, that there are frustration and there's a need, and kind of this idea of having an on-demand as well contraceptive, where the body is changed just when it needs to be changed and then goes back to normal. There's several cultures, for instance, where the loss of period is seen as a semi-traumatic event as well, and it feels like you're losing fertility, and that's something that's not wanted. So yeah, but that said, there are also some differences. For instance, specifically about between Europe and the US, we see differences in the willingness of women to apply manually anything vaginally, so to touch basically their body. In the US, it's also known for tampons, that most US women use applicators for tampons, versus in Europe, you could use your finger. So you certainly have to look at different markets and understand exactly how the user will interact with the product and view the product. And I think that's reflected actually in, when you go in the US, we're aiming for the US as a first market, so we have to go through the Food and Drug Administration. They have the requirements for clinical trials, and they will tell you, don't do your clinical trial in Europe. You have to go in the US, have a representative, be representative of the population. It's in its very broad diversity in the US, because the results might vary dramatically compared to what you get in Europe.
And from an investment perspective.
So I've been more closely mapping the European scene, but obviously, I would have actually answered that I don't think it's necessarily specifically to femtech the differences. I think in health tech in general there are differences between the market when it comes to approvals, trials, regulation overall, but then also just in terms of in any industry, Europe is more fragmented in terms of differences between countries, the need for localization. Also, when it comes to not only the product but the branding side of things, etc. So, but I don't think it's necessarily kind of a femtech issue, really.
Specifically, Pauliina, we talked about this a little bit the other day, and it's sort of a complicated question because I think we're still dealing with this, but what is the importance of having women on the teams that are creating these products and making decisions about them, doing the research about them? Can you speak to that a little bit, please?
Yes, always a good question. So first of all, I think you don't have to be a female investor to be able to invest in femtech. You don't have to be a female founder to found femtech companies. I think diversity is key here too. That being said, what still frustrates me a little bit, again, this is not a femtech specific thing, but I think when it comes to health tech in general, I still actually come across products and teams that kind of profile them or position themselves as everyone's wellness or health advisors and products, and in fact they are every now and then building the products based on really kind of biased data sets still in 2021, etc. So I'm just again, I'm very much kind of a investor approaching everything from the brand point of view. So I'm just a fan of being transparent in terms of who you target. It's totally fine to overlook the other half, but then just be transparent about it when actually marketing the product. So I mean, we're talking about femtech, so I think we can talk about mentech then in the cases where we don't take into account the other half. But I definitely think when it comes to femtech, I think everyone should be involved in making those products.
Absolutely. And I know that it's a predominantly female-led team.
Well, yeah, we are two male co-founders, right? So I think that has, is I think at first actually you were met with some skepticism about, two males founding a femtech. But then I think that very quickly people understand our story and they feel that we come from a genuine place, and I think that again is very important. This whole this journey started with my co-founder Frederick having a conversation with his girlfriend that told him, I don't want to do the pill anymore because I can't stand the side effects. And that led to more conversations with users, with women, that eventually led to this. So it's always been about women and their needs and their frustration. And from day one, we've hired actually a designer to continue that discussion, to do surveys, to understand what would the ideal contraceptive look like. So we've been extremely user-centric, and we've been making sure the science works towards that. And I think it's relatively, maybe unique in an early stage startup to invest in that. Typically, with limited funding, you want to get your technology down, and then you'll figure out how to package that in a product. We've seen that maybe for other, contraceptive products, and we see the results that you get from that. So we want to make sure that women are in the center in that process. And then, we have a very diverse team, mostly women actually. And of course, they bring unique insights that we would not have. We'll never be a direct user of the product. That said, I want to insist as well on the fact that, so first of all, contraception is hard. We need all the talents, right? So we want to be as inclusive as possible. So we can't afford, I think, to leave some people out based on gender. And then also in your kind of private conversation with contraception, I think it should evolve towards a conversation between, in the couple, and should involve the man and the woman, and you move away from being exclusively kind of to women. So I encourage that inclusiveness.
Well, good. We're running up on time here a little bit, so I want a sort of general question to you, Pauliina, which is, what do you think now, if we want to get this market to look like a $60 billion, it's a massive number market by 2027, what does it need to grow and develop?
I think we've covered most of the points already. More research, more data, more entrepreneurs. I actually believe that there is tons of research coming up and tons of opportunities to make some spin-outs based on those or in that research. So I believe that will drive us towards more companies being founded, and then obviously we'll unlock the funding too. So I think we're on the way.
You mentioned to me the other day that one of the things that's important is having more women educated in leadership positions and female health being more destigmatized as a part of the development of this market.
Yeah, I think that's maybe more on the kind of like what's driving the consumer side of things, and I think we've touched that a little bit already. But I definitely think that, like for instance, just looking at my friend circle at the moment, it's mind blowing to me that there can be like highly educated people. Like Nordic should be like the best in the world when it comes to education. There are highly educated young women who actually have no idea how their body works. So I think there's tons to do also, like just doing the research first, but then actually just getting that kind of like publicly known, and that will then also obviously then kind of drive the consumer demand for more smart solutions going forward.
Okay. Well, we have about 5 minutes left, so just a reminder that you can submit questions through Slido, which is an app that you should all have on your phones. So just to wrap up, one more question for both of you. What can we expect from this market in the next 5 years or so? Pauliina, if you could start.
I'm expecting to see at least 2 femtech unicorns in Europe in the next 5 years.
There you go. I'm like desperately waiting for strong exits actually, and very impressive exits. So that's being a front runner. That is the problem. You don't have the track record. You really have to convince from scratch that will eventually be the unicorn, and we have to look in the periphery to see what kind of exits we can refer to. So I really hope. Well, we'll be, we might be one of them, but we hope that others could be there as well. And just to bounce on what you said, of course, education is important, but I think we need more people like you as well. We certainly seeing like the dynamics when talking to investors is very different if you have a Zoom room or actual room full of men, typically older men, or if you have a female lead. Right away, you see the difference. You see. It's not that these men are, are stupid or anything, or not, theoretically interested. They just can't really relate, and they don't have the sense of urgency. And so when they look at 100 or 1,000 different projects, this one won't really stand out in the way that it will stand out for female kind of leads. So I really hope that the number of female partners will dramatically increase, and that will be a very important factor for the development of Femtech in general.
Yeah. I'm definitely with you on that I hope that there will be more female investor partners, but also I think it's a little bit of a lame excuse from the male investors, because like we do a bunch of B2B investments where we are not the users ourselves, and we can very well do the referral calls and kind of understand the market, etc. I'm not saying that you were wrong, but I think it's the investors kind of a bad excuse every now and then.
Yeah.
Of course. Questions, people? I have one here, but I would like more. So I think this is just a clarification question, and it is, can we call it Femtech if it's a solution catered to women, but not concerning health, for example, wealth?
I mean, I think the term originally was spun out as women's health, but I think it's getting where kind of people are using it more broadly, definitely. And I think it's anyway like a fluid term. It's not something that has a very clear definition, I think. I see it as women's health, but...
That's where it's, I guess, you were asking where the most pressing needs, and I guess that's where they are. And where they're more defined. So that's where we're starting. But hopefully in 5-10 years from now, we would just not be talking about Femtech anymore, right?
It also includes categories like sex tech too.
Yeah.
So sexual health, relationships, things like that. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, I think that's all for today. I want to thank you all for coming, and I want to thank my panelists. If we could give them a round of applause. You guys were wonderful. Thank you. I'll let my wonderful stage host.